the meeting that almost split the Allies, January 8, 1945. It was a frigid morning on January 8, 1945, in the war-torn heart of Europe. The Battle of the Bulge had just raged through the Ardennes forest like a savage beast, claiming tens of thousands of lives in snow-choked trenches and fog-shrouded hills. American GIs, frost-bitten and exhausted, had held the line against Hitler's last desperate gamble. But amid the echoes of artillery fire and the stench of cordite, a different storm brewed. Not on the battlefield, but in the dimly lit command rooms of the Allied headquarters at Versailles, France. The air was thick with tension, heavier than the cigarette smoke curling from ashtrays. Maps sprawled across tables like battle scars, marking the jagged front lines from the Rhine to the Vosges Mountains. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower, his face etched with the weight of command, sat across from Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the sharp-featured British hero of El Alamein. Monty, as he was known, puffed on his pipe, his eyes gleaming with that unyielding confidence that had won deserts but lost friends. Then, Eisenhower leaned forward, his Kansas drawl cutting through the silence like a bayonet. "Bernard," he said, his voice steady but laced with steel, "either you follow orders or you're finished." No explosions, no gunfire, just words that could shatter an alliance. This wasn't a clash of armies. It was a duel of egos, where one man's pride threatened to unravel the fragile thread holding the Allies together. And it all stemmed from a press conference the day before, where Montgomery had boasted to the world, claiming credit for victories that belonged to bloodied American boys. What followed was a tale of hubris, heroism, and the raw grit of leadership in the crucible of World War II. A story that reminds us how close victory came to slipping away, not from German panzers, but from Allied discord. By the dawn of 1944, the tides of World War II had turned against the Axis powers, but the Allied coalition teetered on the edge of internal collapse. The beaches of Normandy still echoed with the thunder of D-Day's invasion on June 6, where over 150,000 troops stormed Hitler's fortress Europe in the largest amphibious assault in history. American, British, Canadian, and Free French forces had punched through the Atlantic Wall, but now, as they pushed inland through hedgerows and bombed out villages, the real battle was among the generals. At the helm stood General Dwight David Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. Ike, as his troops affectionately called him, was a product of the American Midwest, born in Denison, Texas, in 1890, raised in Abilene, Kansas. He was no battlefield firebrand like Patton. Instead, he was the consummate diplomat, a five-star general who juggled egos as deftly as he orchestrated armies. His strategy was broad front, advance across Europe on multiple axes, squeezing the Germans like a vice from the west. Calm under pressure, with a disarming smile that masked an iron will, Eisenhower navigated the political minefields of Washington, London, and Moscow. He reported to President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill, balancing American industrial might with British imperial pride. Opposite him was Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, a man whose name evoked the sands of North Africa. Born in 1887 to a strict Anglican bishop father, Monty rose through the ranks with a flair for drama and a genius for set-piece battles. His victory at El Alamein in 1942 had halted Rommel's Afrika Korps, boosting British morale after years of defeats. Slim, bespectacled, with a beret perched jauntily on his head, Montgomery was brilliant in planning, meticulous, cautious, and unapologetically self-assured. But his brilliance came wrapped in arrogance. He craved control, demanding that all ground forces fall under his command, dismissing American strategies as amateurish. As 1944 unfolded, the fractures deepened. Montgomery's Eighth Army and the American forces under generals like Omar Bradley and George Patton raced across France after the breakout from Normandy in Operation Cobra. Paris fell on August 25, liberating the City of Light in a whirlwind of joy and champagne. But Monty wanted more. He pushed for a narrow thrust strategy, concentrating forces in the north to dash for Berlin, ending the war swiftly. Eisenhower rejected it, opting for his broad advance to prevent German regrouping. Monty seethed, viewing Ike as a political hack rather than a true soldier. Every victory amplified the tension. After the capture of Antwerp on September 4, Montgomery basked in the glow, giving speeches that highlighted British contributions while sidelining the Americans. Press briefings became his stage. He'd stride in, map pointer in hand, declaring how his plans were the linchpin of success. "The war is being won my way," he'd imply, his clipped British accent dripping with certainty. Eisenhower, monitoring from his headquarters, noted the growing resentment among his American commanders. Bradley, the steady Missourian leading the 12th Army Group, grumbled about Monty's poaching of supplies. Patton, the flamboyant tank wizard, openly called Monty a tired little fart in private letters. The press fueled the fire. Newspapers like the New York Times and the Times of London ran stories pitting the generals against each other, with Monty often portrayed as the mastermind. British politicians, eager for national glory after years of blitz and rationing, encouraged him. Churchill himself, a fan of Monty's audacity, whispered encouragements. But Eisenhower, with his eye on the bigger picture, bit his tongue. He knew unity was paramount. A fractured alliance could extend the war, costing countless lives. Yet, as autumn leaves fell over the Siegfried Line, Ike's patience wore thin. Montgomery's demands for priority in fuel and ammunition starved other fronts, leading to stalled advances. Whispers in Schaeff's Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force suggested Monty was angling for Ike's job. By December 1944, as German forces launched their surprise Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, the rift threatened to become a chasm. Eisenhower temporarily placed American armies under Monty's command to stabilize the northern flank, a decision that saved lives but inflamed egos. Monty, ever the opportunist, used it to bolster his image. Eisenhower watched, his tolerance ebbing like the receding German salient. The stage was set for confrontation, where one man's ego could derail the march to victory. In the grand tapestry of this wasn't just about strategy. It was about the human frailties that could doom even the mightiest coalition. Following the thunderous success of D-Day on June 6, 1944, the Allied advance through Normandy morphed into a grinding slog against fanatical German resistance. Hedgerow country, Bocage they called it, turned every field into a kill zone, with panzer divisions lurking behind earthen walls. American forces under Bradley's 1st Army and Patton's 3rd Army broke out in late July, sweeping across France in a blitz of their own. But Field Marshal Montgomery, commanding the 21st Army Group, saw this as his moment to seize the narrative. Monty's mouth, sharp as a commando's dagger, became his most potent weapon off the battlefield. In press conferences held in makeshift tents amid the ruins of Cayenne, a city pulverized by Allied bombers, he spoke as if the entire European campaign orbited around him. "The British and Canadian forces have drawn the enemy onto themselves," he'd declare, implying American gains were mere sideshows. Reporters lapped it up. Headlines in London papers screamed Monty's masterstroke, while American troops, knee-deep in mud and blood, felt slighted. This wasn't new for Monty. Back in Sicily in 1943 during Operation Husky, he'd clashed with Patton over who reached Messina first, turning a victory into a personal race. Now, amplified by wartime propaganda, his words cut deeper. After the Falaise Pocket in August 1944, where tens of thousands of Germans were encircled and annihilated, Montgomery claimed it as his brainchild, downplaying Bradley's role in closing the gap. "My plan worked perfectly," he told correspondents. His beret tilted at a defiant angle. American generals erupted. Omar Bradley, the soft-spoken but steely commander of over 1 million men, confided to aides that Monty's egotism is insufferable. George Patton, roaring through Brittany with his tanks, wrote in his diary, "Monty is a prick. Thinks he's God Almighty." Even milder souls like Courtney Hodges of the First Army muttered about British arrogance. The press amplified the discord. The Stars and Stripes, the GI newspaper, ran subtle digs at Monty's self-promotion, while British tabloids hailed him as the war's savior. British politicians, from Whitehall to Westminster, were uneasy. Winston Churchill, who admired Monty's fighting spirit, nonetheless cautioned him via cables to tone down the rhetoric. "Unity is strength," the Prime Minister growled. But Monty paid little heed. He viewed Eisenhower's broad front strategy as flawed, advocating instead for a single thrust under his command, 40 divisions piercing the Ruhr like a lance. In letters to Ike, he argued passionately, but publicly, he undermined the Supreme Commander by suggesting U.S. forces were supporting his operations. Eisenhower remained stoic, his headquarters at Versailles a hive of multinational activity. Aides like Beadle Smith, his chief of staff, urged confrontation, but Ike demurred. "Bernard's a fine soldier," he'd say, puffing on his lucky strikes, "but he needs reining in." Privately, though, the strain showed. Roosevelt and Marshall back in Washington pressed for harmony, fearing Congress might cut aid if Anglo-American relations soured. As autumn 1944 dragged on, with rain turning roads to quagmires, Monty's comments escalated. After capturing the vital port of Antwerp intact on September 4, he boasted to the BBC, "This is the fruit of British planning." The Americans seethed. In the field, GIs swapped jokes about Monty's war, while officers lobbied Ike for more autonomy. British officers, loyal to their field marshal, defended him as a victim of Yankee jealousy. The divide wasn't just personal. It reflected deeper cultural clashes. British caution versus American boldness. Empire versus Republic. Eisenhower, the mediator, drafted memos urging restraint, but Monty's tongue remained unchecked. By December 16, 1944, when Hitler unleashed the Ardennes offensive, Monty's words had sown seeds of distrust. As German panzers sliced through American lines, Eisenhower made the tough call: shift the U.S. 1st and 9th Armies to Monty's command. It stabilized the front, but Monty saw it as vindication. In briefings, he critiqued American intelligence failures, further alienating allies. Eisenhower, directing from his map room, knew silence couldn't last. The weapon of Monty's mouth had wounded too deeply, setting the stage for a reckoning amid the winter's fury. In Wee's unforgiving arena, words could kill alliances as surely as bullets. September 1944 dawned with optimism in Allied camps, the swastika banners crumbling across Western Europe. Paris liberated, Brussels fallen, the Wehrmacht reeled. But Field Marshal Montgomery, ever the visionary, proposed a bold stroke to end the war by Christmas. Operation Market Garden. It was audacious. An airborne carpet of 35,000 paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines to seize bridges over Dutch rivers, paving a 64-mile corridor for armored thrust to Arnhem and beyond, into Germany's industrial heart. Eisenhower, wary of overextension, approved it against his instincts. His broad front approach favored steady pressure, but Monty's persistence and Churchill's lobbying swayed him. Supplies were diverted. The British XXX Corps under Brian Horrocks geared up. On September 17, the skies over Holland filled with C-47s and gliders. American 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions, the Screaming Eagles and All-Americans, jumped into Eindhoven and Nijmegen. The British 1st Airborne, the Red Devils, targeted Arnhem. At first it soared. Paratroopers floated like deadly confetti, securing key spans amid cheers from Dutch civilians waving orange flags. But cracks appeared swiftly. Intelligence underestimated German strength. SS Panzer divisions, refitting nearby, counterattacked viciously. Frost's battalion at Arnhem Bridge held heroically, but reinforcements lagged. XXX Corps, bogged in traffic on Hell's Highway, advanced inch by bloody inch against ambushes. The disaster unfolded in slow motion. At Arnhem, isolated Paris fought house to house with bayonets and fists as ammo dwindled. Out of ammunition. God save the king. Radioed one unit before silence. The Rhine crossing failed. The bridge too far remained in Nazi hands. By September 25, the operation collapsed. Casualties mounted. Over 17,000 Allied troops killed, wounded, or captured. More than D-Day. The 1st Airborne was decimated, losing 7,500 men. Montgomery, from his caravan headquarters, refused blame. 90% successful, he proclaimed to the press, citing captured territory. He faulted weather for delaying drops, American transport for supply issues, and even Polish paratroopers for late arrival. Never himself. The planner. Eisenhower, digesting reports in Versailles, saw the folly. Market Garden had squandered momentum, allowing Germans to fortify the Rhine. Bradley and Patton fumed. Patton quipped, "Monty's airborne circus cost us the war this year." The fallout rippled. In London, Parliament debated. Churchill defended Monty but privately lamented the gamble. In Washington, Marshall questioned Eisenhower's deference. GIs in the field, hearing of the debacle, lost faith in British leadership. Monty's deflection exacerbated tensions. He wrote Eek suggesting the failure proved the need for his narrow thrust, ignoring the botched execution. As October rains turned battlefields to sludge, Eisenhower pondered. Market Garden wasn't just a tactical flop, it exposed Monty's hubris. His refusal to accept responsibility mirrored earlier blunders, like the slow pursuit after Alamein. Ike, chain-smoking through sleepless nights, decided enough. The operation's ghosts, paratroopers dangling from trees, bridges exploding in flames, haunted him. Unity cracked. American commanders whispered of separate commands. By December, as the bulge erupted, Market Garden's shadow loomed. Montgomery's blame shifting had eroded trust, pushing Eisenhower to the brink. In Wee's narrative, this wasn't mere defeat. It was the catalyst for confrontation, where strategy met personality in a clash that could alter history's course. The final straw had broken, demanding action. The Ardennes snows of December 1944 melted into January's chill, but the heat of Allied discord burned hotter. Hitler's Bulge offensive, launched on December 16, had gouged a 50-mile salient into American lines, costing 89,000 U.S. casualties. Eisenhower's swift response, shifting armies to Montgomery's control, blunted the attack. By January 7, 1945, the front stabilized, Germans retreating. That day, Monty held a press conference in Zonhoven, Belgium. Before microphones and notepads, he praised British resolve, implying his leadership saved the day. "The Battle of the Ardennes is very much a British victory," he said, crediting his counterattack plans while downplaying American heroism. It was tone-deaf. U.S. papers exploded with outrage. Monty Steele's thunder blared headlines. Bradley threatened resignation. Patton raged. Eisenhower, in Versailles, received transcripts. Fury built. This wasn't strategy. It was sabotage. He summoned Monty for a private meeting on January 8. No aides, no recorders, just two men in a Spartan room, adorned with maps and blackout curtains. Monty arrived, beret in place, pipe clenched. He launched into defense, explaining how his press remarks boosted morale, how Market Garden's flaws were external, how his vision remained superior. Words flowed. Excuses, justifications, the same old tune of self-aggrandizement. Eisenhower interrupted, his voice level but commanding. No theatrics. Ike's power lay in restraint. He laid out the damage. Monty's comments fractured unity, emboldening German propaganda, demoralizing troops. "Your self-promotion undermines the team," he said, eyes locked. He cited specifics. Press leaks, strategy leaks, blame games post-Arnhem. Monty bristled, arguing his record, Alamein, Normandy, entitled candor. But Ike pressed. Refusal to shoulder responsibility was cowardice in command. The room tensed. Outside, guards paced, unaware of the alliance's fate hanging by threads. Then, the Corps, Monty's public barbs, questioned Ike's authority, risking rebellion among generals. Eisenhower, drawing on his diplomatic arsenal, evoked the greater good. The boys in foxholes, families back home. This was We's essence, collective sacrifice over individual glory. The ultimatum loomed, cold as the winter outside. In that closed door, history pivoted, egos clashing like tanks at Kursk.
Count 1005.
In the hushed confines of that Versailles room on January 8, 1945, Eisenhower delivered his verdict without fanfare. No raised voice, no pounding fist, just the unyielding tone of a leader at his limit. Bernard, he said, you have two choices. First, toe the line. Follow orders without question, cease press engagements that sowed division, and behave as a subordinate in the chain of command. No more solo spotlights, no more veiled criticisms of American allies. Or second, removal from command. Despite Monty's fame, the Desert Fox Slayer, the D-Day architect, Eisenhower would relieve him, sending him back to Britain in disgrace. Political fallout be damned. Unity trumped all. Monty, for once, fell silent. His pipe went cold. The bravado evaporated. Years of unchecked ego met unbreakable will. He nodded, accepting the terms, though resentment simmered beneath. This moment crystallized We leadership, not medals or maps, but enforcing discipline amid chaos. Eisenhower's gamble paid off, preserving the alliance at its nadir. Post-confrontation, Montgomery transformed, outwardly. He curtailed press interactions, focusing on operations. No more grandstanding, his communiques became terse, team-oriented. The 21st Army Group pushed steadily, crossing the Rhine in March 1945 during Operation Plunder. Eisenhower consolidated control, his broad front strategy vindicated as Allies encircled the Ruhr pocket, capturing 317,000 Germans. Unity held. Bradley and Patton advanced without hindrance. Victory in Europe arrived May 8, 1945, VE Day. Parades in London and New York celebrated. But beneath, scars lingered. Monty received honors, a viscountcy, but his legend dimmed in American eyes. The war ended not on ego, but in forced authority. Eisenhower's stand ensured coordinated might crush Nazism, a lesson in humility amid heroism.
112.
Had Eisenhower faltered, the Allies might have splintered. American rebellion could have prolonged the war, allowing German recovery or Soviet overreach. Lives lost, Europe redrawn. This confrontation underscored leadership's essence. Beyond tactics, it's taming egos for the common cause. In We's saga, it's a reminder. Victory demands not just courage, but the guts to say enough to even legends. History pivots on such moments, where authority saves the day.